Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Professional Learning. I'm pleased to welcome you to another town hall meeting regarding our reopening, specifically our teaching and learning hybrid plan this evening. We'll get started here in just a few moments, just a few pieces of Zoom etiquette. Please be sure to make sure that your camera is off and you are muted. We will have time at the end, as we'll go through in a second here, for some community questions and answers. Just want to welcome some of our district team members joining this Zoom town hall. We will receive a welcome note from Mr. Anthony DiCarlo, our Superintendent of Schools. Dr. Greg Stoll, our Assistant Superintendent for Pupil Personnel and Education Services, is joining us as well. And I'm on the call, obviously, as well. To drill down further into some of our logistics so everybody can have an enjoyable and informative evening, we have disabled the chat. And again, we do not disable the chat because we do not want to hear from anyone. We have found that over the course of long Zoom meetings, that if we have a chat enabled and we're using that, we can't get to everybody who's asking questions. And we want to make sure that we will use our time at the end to allow for ample questions and answers. So that is the reason why the chat is disabled. Again, please make sure you are muted and your mic is off. And the Zoom session is being recorded. It will be recorded, I believe, to our YouTube account and also streamed on our appropriate channels. And attendance in the Zoom is consent to that recording. Just a reminder of the purpose of this evening. Through this brief presentation, we wanted to take time with you to share our best thinking at this time about our hybrid model and how to best educate and support our students in that model. And we continue the objectives of these town halls that go all the way back to even in June when we held initial town hall meetings. We want to give you our best thinking about our current approach to reopening, continue the community-based conversation, and to respond to any questions and to gather feedback from our community. And with that in mind, just as a reminder, I would ask you to please remember that all plans, particularly in this pandemic, are subject to change during these unique and challenging times. And what we're presenting to you tonight is our best thinking at this time. Additionally, as we have said before, we are opening school in a manner that's never been tried before, and in part due to this worldwide pandemic. Many ask why we aren't taking approaches that other districts are. And I would urge you to consider that we continue to exchange information and listen and learn from other districts, but each school district and each community have structures that are unique to that school district and the community, such as resources, capacity of buildings, contractual obligations, budgetary frameworks, and staffing frameworks, meaning that not every plan can be replicated in every district. And before we get started, just a word about our transition time, which began today. We were very excited to have to welcome our K-2 students back to our building in a hybrid model, to have our 6th graders and our 9th graders. As a reminder, this was put in place by the superintendent to have a transition of those grades who have never been in those buildings before and some very early learners. We wanted them to be able to experience new protocols, to ensure that they have the ability to follow those safety protocols, and that's where our focus has been. So what we have seen over the past few weeks, you may have noticed a difference from previous remote learning. We're focusing tonight on what our model will look like on the 5th. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. DiCarlo, who will frame our welcome everybody and frame our town hall conversation. Mr. DiCarlo?
Thank you, Mr. Tremblay, very, very much. And I just want to echo being out today when students were arriving, being in the buildings and being there for dismissals. I had a 6th grade young man said to me, "Oh, Mr. DiCarlo, we're finally here. I'm so excited." And I think that's the important piece, because at the end of the day, it's that in-person connection in front of kids, which we all know is the best educational model. But because we are involved with COVID-19 and the requirements of social distancing and mask wearing, we were not able to have everybody come in at once. We also know that dating back to the end of August, we had to make a change. Our original plan was to be in that hybrid model, but as we had to work through staffing concerns, it took us a number of weeks to be able to get to the point where we can go back to that hybrid model and welcome our students back throughout K-12. This week being K-1, 2, and then 6 and 9. We were able to do that earlier than we initially thought. We're happy about that. But really what is important to understand is that as Mr. Tremblay, Dr. Stowell, Jennifer Pontillo from our Administrators Association, and Tom McMahon have really been working hard through that time frame as we worked on our staffing concerns to come up with a plan that met the needs of all learners. I know there's some misinformation that's out there to what that looks like and what's happening and what's going on. But as I've mentioned all along the way, that there's going to be bumps in the roads. There are going to be some things that we learn as we go through. And Mr. Trombley and Dr. Stowell will tell you a little bit about that learning and what we've heard from our teachers along the way with regards to the hybrid model and how we've made some of those adjustments as we move forward. What's really important is that we are able to meet the needs of our staffing. We know that there are going to be some of our staff members, because of their health and accommodation needs, will be teaching fully remote, and that we will have teachers and or aides and monitors in those classrooms so that we can have that instruction from those teachers. We've also been very fortunate to go out and get teacher assistants, add more of permanent subs to each one of our buildings, so that on those days that things may happen, and I've said this, and it's really important, I know you're listening to what's happening around our surrounding districts. At any point in time, ladies and gentlemen and parents, we could go fully remote, depending on what's happening in a building, in a grade level, or throughout the district. And I really want to emphasize, I usually say this to you in the middle of October, about really making sure that your kids know your emergency plans, because at any point in time, because of weather conditions in the past, we may have to do an early dismissal and your son or daughter might have to go home earlier than intended. Well, that's going to be happening with COVID. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And as you can see, it's happening around us. So please make sure, even though right now we have K-1-2 and it's 6-9, but next week everybody will be in. Make sure you go over what those emergency plans are. For some reason, should we have to close our schools early as directed by the Board of Health. I also want to just mention to everybody that, as we go through these models, we're learning. Every day we're learning from teachers, we're learning from students. And this week and next week are transition weeks. We really have not established a pattern and routines yet for what we're doing, because of some of the things that are beyond our control, because of the virus itself and other things that became factors. So, I beg that you basically allow us to establish what those routines and protocols will be. Like I said, tonight you'll hear about the hybrid model. You'll hear about what that means for students who are learning in that hybrid day when they're not in school. You'll be hearing about what will be happening with the kids that are in school. And most importantly, also hearing about those students who are home remotely. And that is the purpose for having this meeting tonight, so we can share those models with you and we could talk about where we're headed and where we're looking to go, clearly understanding that things can change at a moment's notice. So I thank you for being a part of the town hall tonight. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Trombley and Dr. Stowell.
Thank you, Mr. DiCarlo. And to echo what Mr. DiCarlo said, when we talk about why did we engage in some updates to our hybrid plan, the updates we're about to present to you are a result of continuous engagement with numerous stakeholder groups, such as building leaders, teachers, parents, support staff, and regional partners, who all continue to learn more about this new teaching and learning environment. Additionally, our Association of Mahopac Administrators, Mahopac Teachers Association, and district leadership representatives spent significant time ensuring that these updates were made in a manner that best met the instructional needs of our students from a variety of perspectives. The overarching concepts that shape this update to the learning plan address a need to ensure a high-quality hybrid model where in-person learners receive a safe, engaging, and effective instructional environment, and our remote learners are supported, connected to the classroom, and progressing through established course and grade curriculum. During this time period of our remote-only opening, we had the opportunity to learn a great deal, not only about our protocols, but also about our approaches to instruction. We've seen challenges that some of our best teachers have brought to our attention on being sure that they're able to provide a safe and engaging in-person environment, but also to our in-person learners, while also ensuring that our at-home hybrid and fully remote learners are supported and connected. So we engaged with them, we asked them what it might look like to address that concern. The result of that conversation is what we present to you tonight. What we've learned is that mandated in the live stream, the classroom presented challenges, I said, such as the focus would be on the remote side of the classroom and the in-person students would not receive the best experience. Also, we've heard from parents during this remote only that they do not want their children sitting in front of a screen for 7 hours a day. And so we process this and additional pieces of information to present to you our plan tonight. And again, those are the overarching themes of these updates, wanting a high quality in-person experience for our learners and also connected remote learners. I want to just remind you of where we can see the specific updates to the plans. If you access our Mahopac Central School District website, under quick links, you can click on the MCSD reopening website. In the table of contents, there is the teaching and learning plan. And on page 20 of that teaching and learning plan, you will see the expectations we detail in tonight's presentation. There's also, even though you aren't able to click on it, there is the link for the URL that the plan is available on. If you were to navigate to that document and drill down, these are the highlights that you'll see for the plan. At the elementary, a hybrid student, and I'll show you a sample schedule in a second here. A sample elementary student who is in the hybrid model will receive a 2-time daily live meet with their classroom teacher. They will receive whatever specials they have, a 40-minute special. They will connect live to that instruction. And they will also have independent teacher-provided learning activities in general, and I'll go into details in a second, in general that they will work on. The classroom teacher is the teacher of record. They are the ones who will continue to assign report card grades and progress and ensure that all students, no matter what modality they are learning in, are progressing through the established curriculum. And additionally, our hybrid students will be in school 5 out of every 10 learning days, going all the way back to our spring remote town halls where we listened to what went well and what didn't go well in remote. We considered a various number of models, whether it be in-class hybrid model where you have students Monday and Tuesday and then the other cohort on Thursday and Friday. We heard that we wanted to be in school as much as possible. So that's why we have a rotating in a 10-day cycle. Students will be in 5 days out of those 10 days. Drilling down into what this may look like. Students daily will participate in all teacher established class meets. At a minimum, that's 2, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. In those meets, teachers will be taking attendance, giving the learning plan for the AM or the PM session, answer any questions that any learners have about assigned work, clarify in detail the plan and expectation for all learners, including the remote learners, including those who are on the hybrid at home portion of their day. Teachers are asked to consider providing opportunities for whole class interactions, such as read alouds, student wellness and community building activities, and other educational related activities. Students, if not on a meet, teachers can have as many meets as they want. If not on a teacher established meet, students will complete teacher structured and created independent practice assignments aligned to the curriculum. All of the resources for students will be made and posted in Google Classroom. And again, students will connect each day. If they have art or music, they will connect to that. And any questions submitted by students or families to teachers should be responded to within 24 hours. Additionally, we do not want our students who are assigned independent work that may be graded to not have the opportunity to have feedback before that is graded. So if a teacher assigns a student at home work, which will be graded, before it is entered into the gradebook, the teacher will provide individual feedback to the student when requested, making sure that they have had instructions clarified, any questions answered, to make sure that when they turn it in, they feel strongly that they've understood what's been asked of them.
Mr. Chomley, if I just may add one thing, if you're at home thinking about this when your child is on the remote portion of their hybrid schedule, our teachers are really concerned about ensuring that nobody's at home struggling alone. And so what we want to stress is we've never really done this before. Nobody has. And our teachers are going to get better and better and better at this as we get more time under our belt and we have more students come in. So as Mr. DiCarlo knows as a former teacher and former principal, as he said, as we started to get kids in this week, it's really important to know that we're just getting used to having kids in the building. As kids start to come more regularly and there's kids at home and kids in their classroom, we'll get more proficient, our teachers will get more proficient. But the bottom line is this: when we met with the teachers union and we met with the administrators union, is that our teachers don't want any kid to struggle. So if a kid is struggling, please reach out to that classroom teacher. And as Mr. Trombley said, the classroom teacher is responsible to ensure that your child is progressing through the curriculum. And that is something very important, that we're all in this together, and that we want what you want, which is your child to have a great educational experience and progress through the curriculum. And I think that's important. That kind of maybe gets lost in the plan, but it's the sentiment of why we decided to change the plan more, so we can get better at ensuring your child progresses through the curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. In a similar manner, when we look at a fully remote student, what their daily class structure might look like. Very similar in some aspects to the hybrid, where the students will participate in at least 2 daily meets with their classroom teacher. They'll connect to their specials live and synchronously for those 40 minutes of those specials. And we know, and we heard from our teachers, that there need to be extra supports to keep those connections for the remote only learners, because our hybrid learners will be in, as we said, 5 out of every 10 days. They'll see the teacher, they'll have those connections. We collaborated as a team, the teachers union, the administrators union, and said, what are some structures that we can put in place within our given frameworks that can support those remote learners who may not be able to come in, who will not be coming in to receive any in-person instruction. And so we looked at our structures and we identified we can put in daily 40-minute ELA and daily 40-minute math meets with content area specialists who have an understanding of the content, of how to align it throughout the district in terms of across the grade bands and also across the buildings. And so those will be provided for remote only learners every day, an additional 40 minutes of ELA and an additional 40 minutes of math. In a similar manner, if they are not in a teacher's meet, students who are remote only will be provided with independent activities to help them progress through the curriculum. Teachers, again, they know that they are responsible for all students progressing through the curriculum. And again, in a similar manner, we will have timely feedback loops. If a remote only learner has a question, they will receive a response within 24 hours. And we don't want any work collected from a remote learner that hasn't had the opportunity to have individualized feedback or clarification if they request it. And if there's any questions at all while your child is learning remotely, the first step is to reach out to the teacher and ask those questions. I'm going to show what may be a confusing grid at first, but we'll break it down and put it into manageable viewing here. What we have here is a generic elementary schedule. This is not specific. Please do not say that this is a specific schedule for a specific student. This is a hypothetical that could be looked at. And we also may need to change what this might look like. But as we can view this here, just for your own knowledge, anything in yellow on this schedule there is some aspect of live or synchronous learning in accordance with our minimum expectations of the update to the plan. This is a hybrid student. And for an exemplar purposes, we'll say this is a blue cohort student in week 1. So looking at the way that the cohort schedules are structured, if we take Monday, that student will be in person for all classes. They will be in person with their classroom teacher, going through the teacher provided in-person lessons, their specials, having lunch, having recess, and having all the teacher structured activities as well. However, since this student is hybrid, they will on a Thursday and they're in the blue cohort, they will be at home in the remote hybrid model. That student will still attend the live morning meet. They will receive the learning plan for the day, have any questions that they have answered. They will have an opportunity to ask questions, clarify, and receive a detailed learning plan for the remainder of the day until that afternoon meet, where the teacher will conduct another meet, take attendance, answer any questions that students may have, and also receive clarification about what the expectation is for their learning in the afternoon. And if you even take a look at Friday, you can see that we highlighted there that this particular exemplar student will have a music special that they will connect to for the 40 minutes that's there. If we take a look at a fully remote exemplar schedule that could be in place, and again, this is generic, this is not as specific to a building. As we know, our buildings have different start times, have different period times, and teachers have flexibility within that to design what their schedule might look like. If I'm fully remote on a Monday, you can see that I have time with my teacher in the morning connected live to a meet. I will then have one of my 40-minute meets with my ELA support. I will also have my afternoon meet, and I will meet with my math coach, that additional 40 minutes of instructional time for math. And you can see throughout the week that I also connect to my art, my music, And then again, this is in addition to any other meets that our teachers choose to establish. If we look at the secondary experience, your secondary students, if they are hybrid, they will connect to all of their daily scheduled classes. The teacher at a minimum will hold a meet where they welcome all students, take attendance, answer any questions, give a detailed learning plan for the day, and if they choose to, allow students to leave and work on that independent practice, or they could decide to keep students on the meet for the entire instructional period. I apologize, I was on the remote only slide. Thank you, Dr. Stoll, for letting me know that. If I'm a student who has been released from a meet to work on independent activities, those activities will be placed in the Google Classroom. They will have a detailed instructions for me to follow so that I may do it independently. And again, the classroom teacher is the teacher of record for all the students, ensuring that they progress through the curriculum. If I'm a remote only student, I'm not going to be learning chemistry on my own. If I have a question, I'm going to ask my teacher, and the teacher, while I'm on my hybrid remote learning days, I will receive an answer within 24 hours to that question. And also any work assigned to me while I'm on my hybrid remote portion of my hybrid plan, I will not have to turn in that work for grading. I can if I want to turn it in early, but the teacher will not assign a grade unless I receive any feedback or any clarifications that I request. And again, a hybrid student will attend school 5 out of every 10 instructional days. And the student will have, at every period, they will have that initial meet at a minimum with their classroom teacher to either frame the learning or to let them know you're staying on for the full meet today because we're doing an activity that we can coordinate with everybody in the whole class, or there's an independent activity in there on this topic. Here are some clarification questions about what I'm asking you to do, and we'll touch base tomorrow if you have any questions. Looking at a secondary student who chooses the full remote modality, they will still follow their daily schedule. At each period, this is middle school and high school, the teacher will have a meet for all students where they frame the learning plan, take attendance, answer any questions, provide any clarification. And if not on a structured meet, the remote only student will begin work that the teacher has put into the Google Classroom that has detailed instructions so the student can complete it independently. In a similar way, the classroom teacher is the teacher of record and responsible for all students as they progress through the curriculum. There's still that timely feedback, receiving response to any question within 24 hours. And if you will not have to turn it, you can turn in things early, but you do not receive a grade if you request assistance, and that teacher will then provide you with assistance and clarification on that. And we are providing additional instructional opportunities for remote learners only. At the middle school, for example, we are looking at providing the ability to have the teacher, through their extra help established structure, provide their students with an extra help period in their subject once per week. So perhaps I'm going to have my extra help in English from my classroom teacher on Monday. I'm going to have math on Tuesday, social studies on Wednesday, and in English on Thursday. So there'll be additional supports for those remote only learners to receive instruction and supports from our classroom teachers. At the high school, we're looking at a program similar to Step, where remote only students can receive additional instructional support for the courses that they are taking. And we'll have more information on that communicated out as we come closer to October 10th, where we enact everybody in the hybrid plan. At this point in time, we've given you the full an overview of what the updates look like. We'd like to turn it over to questions from the community. Before I do that, though, I would like to show you where you can find the detailed explanations and the detailed expectations of our remote learning plan. So if you would bear with me for 1 second. If I navigate to the Mahopac Central School District website, underneath the quick links on the reopening plan, if I click on the reopening plan, I'm taken to our reopening website. If we scroll down under the Mahopac Central School District's reopening mitigation plan, this provides information on our safety protocols, our safety considerations, and safety measures. And also it has a link to,
which we did update, just so everybody knows, we made an update on September 24th, just enhanced some of our safety procedures, such as daily temperature screenings and the use of our easy screen and some other things. So we're just like instruction is continuing to evolve, we're continuing to evolve as we learn more and more about safety procedures.
In the table of contents, if I click on the teaching and learning plan, that will bring me to the document that we've been sharing at our town halls, that we've been updating as we continuing to engage with our stakeholders. If we scroll to page 19, that will begin the expectations of what an in-person, a hybrid at home, and a remote only learner will experience. And we broke it down by the elementary level of what the teacher will be doing and of what the student will be doing. And we added detailed notes about additional supports and feedback loops and about what happens when work is assigned. Those details is there as well. We have what will teachers and students engage in during a typical middle school period. We broke it down by teacher and by student. And again, we provided you with these updates. These are the detail with the high level updates. These are the details for every level. And then finally, the high school learning plan for the hybrid updates as well. And so at this time, we'll turn it over to questions from the community. Please utilize the raised hand feature in the participant menu. If you click on participants and you have choices such as yes, no, go slower, faster, raise hand. If you'd like to be recognized to ask a question, please click the raise hand feature and we will progress through everybody who raises their hand. When called on, please unmute yourself and start your video and feel free to ask your question. And when finished, please just simply turn it off and mute yourself. We're going to limit to one question per person because many people may have multiple questions, but we want to make sure we at least get through everybody who has a question so they can be heard. And we're looking for general questions about the updates only. Student-specific questions should be directed towards building administration, or in the case of special education questions, to the appropriate special education administrator. So if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. We'll call upon you and we'll recognize you. So at this time, and again, I'm going to use what your username says. So I apologize if I mispronounce it, and I will only call upon what I see as the username to make sure that we identify the person. First with their hand raised is Jessica Guzzo. Please feel free to state your question.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask, looking at your schedule with the highlights, and again, I know it's a generic schedule, it seems that while the in-person students with the hybrid, while they're receiving ELA and math lessons, the students that are remote that day would be doing independent work. So will the students that are remote, will they be getting any ELA or math lessons via a meet with their teacher, or is that only going to happen the days that they're in school?
So as we anticipate right now, the minimum expectation is that they would receive those live instructional meets, or they would receive live instruction when they're in school. That's not to preclude a teacher from saying, I feel that this is an appropriate instructional activity where I can have groups of in-person and remote learners participate.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, asking a question is Beth Percone. Beth, please feel free to unmute yourself and we look forward to your question.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My question basically is, my child is an elementary student, so is the remote teacher that is I think you mentioned something about there being a content specialist for remote students. Is that going to be the same person as his regularly assigned in-class teacher?
So because of scheduling, we had to find a structure where we could have a dedicated teacher during a time period provide additional supports to what your student would be learning in their teacher's classroom. So if your student is assigned to Mr. Trombley's classroom in elementary, Mr. Trombley is still your student's teacher of record, and they would participate in any assignments that are assigned by Mr. Trombley, and those assignments would be given feedback and assessed by Mr. Trombley. Dr. Stoll, as our content area specialist, knowing that because your child is remote only and won't be in class on a hybrid rotation, we look for additional supports. In this example, Dr. Stoll is our content area specialist who has an understanding of the scope and sequence of the grade levels and the curriculums in those grade levels, and will be providing that additional support to your child.
Right. So Ms. Perricone, I would make sure that I communicate with Mr. Trombley and all the other teachers in that grade and say, what are the what are the core concepts we're covering this week in first grade? I'm going to make it up, right? And so as the content specialist, I'm delivering direct instruction for those remote only kids because I know those kids will never physically be in school. I got to go over all of those. So if we're doing the app family, like the AT family, I'll make sure that my lesson for that day goes over the AT family because I know that week Mr. Trombley is doing on the AT word families. So what we're trying to do is understand that we cannot duplicate in-person instruction at the same time. And so what we're doing is for those remote only kids is giving them direct instruction and covering the same concepts, but while still allowing your child to be part of Mr. Trombley's class, engage in all the activities. And if we decide when it's time, if I decide to go back in to Mr. Trombley's class and go back into hybrid, I haven't missed a beat. Mr. Trombley knows who your child is. I made sure that your child's got all their content. So when they jump back into Mr. Trombley's classroom, they're not behind. And Mr. Trombley knows exactly what Mrs. Pericone's child has been doing and how they're progressing through the curriculum so that there's a fluidity. And if we go full remote for whatever reason, hopefully not, Mr. Trombley may do what he's been doing, the first 2 weeks of school. And my kid, again, your kid hasn't missed a beat and we still get to do it that way. So what it does is it allows the continuity of instruction to happen, but also give something for the kids that are fully remote who will never be in school, something particularly just for them to make sure that they get direct instruction in ELA and math. I hope that was helpful to answer the question.
It was, but it was the model you were just talking about was for a full remote student or for a hybrid student?
Full remote only.
So hybrid students on their remote days are still going to be given work from their regular in-person teacher. That model that you're just describing is for a full remote student.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just to not to drill down to this point at this time, but Dr. Stoll mentioned if we have to go back to remote only plan, the instruction that you've seen over the past couple of weeks, where you have seen your teacher connecting with your students, the entire class, because everybody is remote, that would be the model we go back to if we were forced to, or if we had to go back to a full remote only model. This is, again, just for what we're addressing tonight, for those of you coming in who may be coming in late, this is reviewing the hybrid learning plan at this point in time. Next, who has their hand raised? Lisa. Lisa, please feel free to lower your hand and we look forward to your question, or unmute yourself and we look forward to your question.
Hi. In the past, college classes were always, as part of the curriculum, 5 days a week. How are those going to be handled?
The secondary students will still follow their schedule. So if you are in a college class that meets 5 days a week and it's period 2, your child will connect to that period 2 college class. If it's a college anatomy, they'll connect to college anatomy those 5 days a week, whatever it's scheduled.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Next, having their hand raised is Edith Torres. Edith, we look forward to answering your question.
Hi, good evening. My question is in regards to the Easy Screen screening app. I know this morning the parents received a letter explaining the whole situation, but is there any updates on solving the problem for, like, for example, tomorrow and the rest of the days that the students are gonna assist to the school for the meeting?
Yeah, Ms. Torres, thank you for your question. Yes, there was an issue, just needed to be updated. The app, the company kind of made an update to their app. So that should have been corrected. Remember, part of our plan, what I said earlier, and I think it's a really good question, the Easy Screen app does not officially start until 10/5. And we did that on purpose. We wanted to roll it out, made sure families had an opportunity to download the app or at least get comfortable and practice with it. And the other piece we do have redundancies in our plan. Remember, we are now taking temperatures of every kid that walks in the building. So God forbid that the Easy Screen app goes down one more time. That's okay, because we're taking temperatures, and the regulation is that we only have to periodically do the kind of more comprehensive health screening. So we're asking to do it every day because we think it's good practice. It's a level of mitigation, but we have the redundancy of taking temperatures every day in the event that we have a failure by the application. But hopefully, again, just so everybody's out there, we have a lot of people here tonight. The simple way to do it, if you're still having trouble with the app, is uninstall it on your iOS, your Apple iOS, and just reinstall it, and the updated version should be all fine. And we had other districts that had the same issue, and we're able to correct it mid-morning.
Thank you so much for the clarifying. Thank you so much.
Sure, you bet.
And Dr. Stoll, just to follow up, that was a company update. The Easy Screen vendor had an update. It wasn't a local update on our end. And if need be, you could use the URL too, correct?
Yes, the URL was down for a little bit too. So the URL is just a website. It was in our letter, and you can go direct to the website. If your app is not working so well, you can just type in HTTP, and I don't have it in front of me, but it's on the letter that we sent. You can click on it, and when you do it on your computer using the URL, it looks exactly the same as your app on your Apple phone. And just to note that they do not yet have an Android application, but again, use your URL in your address bar on your browser, and you should be just fine.
Next in our question queue, Ms. Jennifer Marino. Jennifer, we look forward to hearing your question. Please feel free to unmute.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you can explain, are you guys saying that the remote students are going to be getting no live instruction at this point, other than just the introduction to the class in the morning?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. We will have, at a minimum, your children who are on remote only at the elementary. Where are your children? Are they secondary?
They're both secondary. One's middle school and one's high school.
Okay, so for the secondary, they will start each class with a live connection to the teacher at a minimum. If the teacher chooses to have a meet for the full period, they would stay on for that full period. But at that initial meet, the teacher will take attendance, welcome the class, look for an opportunity to clarify the learning plan for all learners on that day, and make sure that every learner has any questions answered before they go off and engage in that learning plan.
So they're not going to be taught though. They're just going to have that, because that's what happened today, but there was no teaching.
So what grade what grade are you referring to where there was no teaching, Jennifer? Was it a sixth grader?
Sixth grade.
Sure.
Yeah.
So again, this is a transition week where we are welcoming our K2 students, our sixth grade students, and our ninth grade students back. And so it may look a little different this week than it does next week, because we wanted our teachers to really go over, number one, connecting with our students, welcoming them to their classroom in those grades, going over some protocols for a school building and a classroom that looked really different from when they left, especially for our sixth and ninth graders. It's a totally different building. The school now looks incredibly different. So the focus this week was on those in-person learners to make sure they understood the protocols, to make sure we could start connecting with them right away. We anticipate on the 5th, when our hybrid plan goes into effect, that you would have that meet where you have the detailed explanation of what's going to occur during that learning plan, and the students have the opportunity to have any questions asked before they go and begin that. And then the next period, they'll have their next teacher right away.
Okay, so, but they're essentially going to be logged off and not being taught for the most of the class. There
will be teacher-created activities that have detailed instructions that are meant to assist the student in progressing through the classroom, through the class, and they will also receive an additional once a week per subject area instructional support from their teacher as well during the teacher's extra help period for that day.
For the remote only.
For the remote only, yes.
So, I think that the other thing is that there's no one size fits all to this. Depending on what my learning objective is. In the secondaries, will check in with their teacher every single period. Now, some periods, just like in regular before pandemic, sometimes teachers would have an independent activity for kids to do. They may set the lesson and do an independent activity, and kids may be doing an assessment in class, and there may not be a lot of. What we know is lecture is not the best way to instruct. So if we think that when we ask our teachers to not just lecture all period, it would be the same if they're on a screen like this. To lecture the whole period is not necessarily good instruction. However, there may be where there is a discussion the whole class period, and we've seen a lot of our secondary teachers kind of rely on that or lean on that. So I think it's not a one size fits all. There may be a period where everybody's remoting in and it's live stream instruction in that period. There may be another period where it's not, depending on the learning objective and learning the activity and what that educator, that professional in ensuring that all kids move through their curriculum. It's really going to be based upon what's the lesson objective, What do I want kids to know and do by the end of the period? And what's the best methodology for me to get everybody on that page? So the nice part about the secondary is they will be checking in with their teacher every single period in the secondary, in the middle, and the high school.
So Ms. Marino, it's Mr. DiCarlo. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. So what should be happening, and if it's not happening and your son or daughter is getting nothing, then that's a conversation that you have to have with the building principal. Because at the end of the day, tomorrow's a full day remote. So they should be checking in tomorrow with their teacher and doing exactly what Mr. Trombley just said. If that's not happening, then please call the building principal. I just spoke to Mr. Kazakria on the phone while the question was being answered, and there should be work that is provided along tomorrow's full day instruction. And if there's not, then please give him a phone call. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. DiCarlo. Next individual has their hand raised, has a username of D. Johnson.
Hi, good evening. Hold on.
Good evening.
I know you said my question really relates around kids with IEPs, and so I can save it or I could talk to the special ed, but it's more or less, you want me to pause because I would have a second question then, because, and like on IEPs, you have teachers' assistants, they're supposed to be one-on-one, things like that. And that's not going to happen in a hybrid model when they're home.
So Ms. Johnson, I'll just give you a general statement, and then anything specific to your child, I would ask you to contact the administrator. We did a Septo town hall. I didn't know if you were able to join us. If not, there's a video of it on our reopening website where we kind of go into those questions. So if your child is at home for either their hybrid and the remote, and they have a teaching assistant on their IEP, yeah, you're going to work with a special ed teacher, and that teaching assistant will be available to support your child while they're at home if that's what's on their IEP.
Okay.
The special ed teacher on their IEP, right? The special ed teacher, as the case manager, will be in contact with you and your child to ensure that those special ed supports are happening. And it may not be the same exact way and the same methodology that they would when they're in person, but that support continues. And we did go over that, and we'd be happy to work with you about your specific child and your specific IEP on the narrow of having that conversation with Mr. Fenton at the elementary school or Dr. Sweeney at the secondary. But
yes, it's both of them.
IEP services continue. They just may look a little different while your kid is at home.
Yeah, that's fine. As long as they're going to get the support on those at home days, which is desperately needed. That's all I care about. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm receiving word that if we reach capacity, we're monitoring the waiting room to make sure anybody who has a question can have it answered. What we're hoping that is that you, since we are nearing capacity of this Zoom call, if you've answered your question, you could watch it on our YouTube where we have it streaming, or our cable channel where we stream it, to make sure that everybody who has a question can ask that. So if we do reach a point where you have community members, friends not being able to get in because we are at capacity, please consider doing that if you have had your question answered. Next in the question queue is username of Colton, C-O-L-T-O-N. Colton, feel free to unmute yourself, and we look forward to your question.
Hi, yes, thank you. It kind of went off of the previous question. So students who, my son specifically is in a kinder ICT class, he's supposed to have support all day long from the special ed teacher. Now, going forward on days that he's remote, how is he supposed to receive full day support from the special ed teacher if she is fully hands-on with the students that are in person?
Thank you very much for that question. I think again, we went over that generally in the Septo meeting about how ICT services look. I don't know if you're able to join us, but we go through all the different levels of services of integrated co-teaching, of what that may look like in a hybrid, what resource room may look like, special class may look like, shared or one-on-one teaching assistance may look like, resource rooms, related services. I would say the best way to get an answer to your question, so we can really delve into the specifics of your child IEP, is if it's at the elementary school, call Mr. Fenton and the classroom teacher and special ed teacher and talk to them about how this is going to work. Again, as I said in the last question, special ed services will be provided, but New York State regulations say that the manner and the way in which we do it may not be exactly the same the way that we do it in school. That it can be done virtually, but it may look and be just a tad bit different.
So on the same level, at what point, how much regression needs to happen before our ICT special ed students are seeing 5 days in person?
Well, as I said, I think this is a question specific. Regression is an individualized discussion around a CSE about a specific child. So I can't make a general statement to it other than say, I think it's really important to have those conversations with your special ed teacher, your classroom teacher, and the committee on special education that has the opportunity to review the data and see if there's substantial regression. There's no one size fits all answer when we're talking about individualized education plan or programs. So again, there's no one individualized way to say that. We hope that doesn't happen. We're going to work really hard to make sure supports and services are there. I mean, I think things are going to change a lot when we get our kids back in school. And even if it's 2 to 3 days a week, I think we're going to see a big difference. And I think what's really important for all of us to know is nobody asked for this pandemic. Nobody asked for not every single kid to be in school. We wish our kids were in school. We need to get through the opening. We need to our real hybrid opening on the 5th. We need to get our kids in. We need to keep safe. We need to make sure our schools stay open. Then we'll have a better way to answer questions like that to see. And then also to be honest and reflective of, is there anything we need to change? So I think we need to put our plans in place and actually have some mileage under our wheels. And then I think from there we can have better discussions about, are there any changes we need to make in our thinking?
Okay, thank you very much.
And as we've said before, this plan, as we best view it right now, to echo what Dr. Stoll said, if we need to change it, we will continue to have these conversations with our teacher leaders, with our building administrators to make sure that what we're doing is the best as within our means and resources and structures of what we can do. Next in the question queue is Daniel Cohen. Daniel, please feel free to unmute yourself and we look forward to answering your question.
Hi, as a pediatrician and a son of teachers, I wanted to follow up on the question Ms. Marino asked. So right now, as you said, during the remote time, the full remote, everyone's getting lectured the entire time in middle school. What, if you can let me into the room, what was the reason for the change that now the remote students are being done independently and taken out? I can understand that the teachers have the choice. Why doesn't the student have the choice to stay in a lecture the whole time?
So we experienced a few things from this remote only opening, whether it be at-home technology issues, connecting to some of the resources that were there, providing explanation of what was being done. And it was time consuming in many areas along that. And it was shared with us that the concerns are there when we are dealing with our remote learners. What will happen to the students in class? How will we ensure that they're progressing along in an effective manner and an engaged manner, and making sure that while we do have our students in front of us, they're able to receive high quality instruction. Because if you think about it, it's now a smaller class size too. So perhaps I can move through curriculum that before took me a little bit longer. Now that I have a smaller class size, I can really focus my instruction. I can tweak some of my instructional approaches to allow me, after I get more comfortable, to perhaps bring in our remote learners in more frequency than I may have before. Thank you for the question. Next raising their hand is user Liz Pinto. Liz, please feel free to unmute and state your question.
Hello.
Hi, Liz.
Hi. So my question is, from the extra help standpoint, why is extra help only being provided to full remote students when many of these, that just confuses me. I mean, other kids should and will have extra help needs. Why is it only being provided to full remote students?
So we had to look for existing structures that were in place where we could have our teachers provide additional supports to our remote only learners, because we know our hybrid students, they will be in class. They will be able to ask perhaps more in-depth questions, receive more in-depth support while they are in class from their classroom teacher. However, even if I'm a hybrid student on my remote day, I can still ask a question of my teacher, and our expectation is that question is responded to within 24 hours. And that's not to preclude any teacher from providing extra assistance to students if they have the time and the resources to do that. But we really wanted to make sure that, because we know that our remote only students would not be in person on a regular cycles, such as our hybrid students, that we found within our existing structures some ways to further support them.
Okay. I don't know. It's just concerning to me because 24 hours is a long time from when a 13-year-old has a question to when they receive an answer. So
understood. In addition, that's why we don't want anything graded. If I'm a student who receives an assignment from a teacher and I'm on my hybrid day, if there's a due date of 2 days from now, I'm more than welcome to turn that in if I get it done ahead of time. But if I have some questions, if I need some clarification, I will not receive a grade on that. It will not be graded or assessed until I have an opportunity to receive that individualized feedback and clarification.
So I guess from a parent standpoint, we'll be the ones monitoring that, because it just concerns me. There are many weeks where these students will be home 3 days, 2 days a week in class, trying to keep up with the work and waiting 24 hours for answers. Really, to me, seems like a hard way to learn. But that's just my 2 cents. I don't. Yeah.
Ms. Pinto, I think it's a really good point. And we discussed that with the MTA and the teachers. And we said, we don't want any kid at home struggling. So when we say 24 hours, what we're really saying is, that teacher needs to find some time to connect with that kid. And I think it goes back to what Mr. DiCarlo said and what Mr. Trombley said. Mr. Trombley said it's the classroom teacher's responsibility to ensure that that child is progressing through the curriculum. So if they're not, and you're reaching out as a secondary student or an elementary student or even a high school student, that teacher needs to be responsive. They need to help you out. And so figuring out ways that they can do that, I think, is important. And it goes back to, I think, what Mr. DiCarlo said, that if your child is struggling to the point and your teacher, and I'm not going to say this is going to happen, but if it does happen, that you reach out to that teacher. And if you need to, you reach out to that principal. Our expectation is that any child at home on their remote days is that they don't wait 2-3 days because until they're in person to get some assistance and get some help. So we do not want kids to sit there silently struggling. We do want them to voice their concerns, voice their expression for getting some extra assistance from the teacher, and if need be, having their parents support them in that effort. We hope it doesn't have to get to that, but our expectation is that classroom teacher helps your child if they're struggling, even if it's a Monday and they're not coming back till a Thursday. I hope that helps a little.
It does, but I do think that understanding it at the time of the lesson being given is a much better way to learn. And I know, as I have 2 kids in the same grade, one will be fine with this 24 hours and one will keep on regressing, to the woman's point before me. So while I understand it, I just don't understand the thinking behind it is just struggling to me, because I don't know that many kids, especially in the middle school level, will comprehend having to wait 24 hours. And what if that answer comes at 7 at night? These kids have been logged in since 7 in the morning. It's unfair to expect them to then try to comprehend the answer from the teacher at that moment. Then they have an additional question, what they have to wait another 24 hours. So I get it. I get that it's not a perfect setting, but I don't see it working.
And just remember, though, I understand that perspective. We're all going to have to work through this. But remember, that next period that they have that teacher, they can ask the question at the beginning of that lesson if they're in the secondary. So, hey, Mr. Trombley, yesterday when you assigned this, I really had some difficulty. Can you explain this quadratic equation? I didn't get it. So they do have an opportunity their next period to answer their question. And to Mr. Trombley's point, what he made earlier, is that nothing gets graded until they have a chance to physically be there. And Mr. Trombley say, Mr. Stoll, when you come in, we're going to work on that together. And this is the other reason that the focus on the kids in front of us, because there's certain things that we can do in person that we cannot duplicate digitally. And that's what the change in this process has been, is like, we really need to get at that kid. So Liz, if your kid is struggling when they're on remote, my job as the teacher, and Mr. Trombley's job as the teacher, is when I get that kid in to understand that quadratic equation was difficult, and I can work specifically with your child and make sure by the time they leave my classroom, they've got that down pat, or I got a learning plan for them so that they can practice it more.
Okay.
Additionally, as Liz, as we wrap up this question, I think it's key to know that communication is a main component of, I think we all know through this pandemic, no matter what we're doing, communication is key. That's why we've held numerous town halls. We've urged our teachers to let students know the best way to communicate them, what type of structures are in place Do I prefer, and we didn't want to go into detail here, so we used, just so everybody had a collective understanding, perhaps an email from a student, but we know that some teachers and students, we've heard at the middle school that they don't use email, they use the messenger through Google, through our Google Classroom, or the stream through Google Classroom. So having a conversation in these early days with what is our best way as a class we communicate or we ask questions is key as well too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Liz. Thank you for the question. Next, we have Mary Sturpey. Mary, please feel free to unmute, and we look forward to your question.
Hi. I actually have a question that's twofolded. I was on the special ed meeting last week, and I have to say, every time I go on one of these meetings, I hear something different, and that's a little concerning to me because I feel like there might be a lack of communication going on. You have spoken about that the teachers are going to have or provide 2 meets in content areas. Do the teachers know that they're supposed to provide the meets inside of a content area? And I'm also wondering, I know that New York State said that the special education this year will look different. How will that look different for the special education kids? And I'm just going to also say that I agree with the woman who spoke before, and I think you need to do some out of the box thinking and get these special education kids some more education.
So Mary, thank you for the question and for the feedback. When we discuss the lack of communication, one of the main, and I apologize if that's how it appears, we have these town halls because we want to be as open and transparent as we can. As soon as we have, as soon as we've had a chance to work with our stakeholders to present the plan as we best know it. So we were in discussion with our teachers union, with our building leaders last week. We alluded to some of the changes that might be coming, but we obviously couldn't announce it last week at the Septo meeting because we were still putting on the details. We were still looking at our structures of what can we be able to do. We've said that this is what we'd like to do. Let's really firm up some of our plans before we go to the public with a plan that we know we can support. So on that aspect, I'd speak to that. In terms of the question about the content area, 2 meets for content area, Mary, could you clarify, are you referring to the remote only students at the elementary level?
I'm talking about the hybrid students. I believe I heard you said the hybrid students would get 2 meets a day, and I believe you said content area. Sure. And I do understand the Children's Day, they're provided by the teachers, and I'm just wondering, there's a morning meeting, there's a closing to the day, and I just wonder. I want to make sure I have things right. They're gonna get 2 content area meetings, or
so the remote only learners, the hybrid learners would not have those additional 40 minutes of ELA and additional 40 minutes of math provided by our instructional ELA and math coaches. The hybrid learners do not have that because the thought process is in a few days they will be back in school learning from in person their teacher. Those 2 additional meets per day were to really ensure that our remote only learners, those learners not going back into school, had additional supports as they progressed through ELA and math.
Okay, so I was one of those 300 participants that kept getting that message, even though I tried to log in at 6:02. So you're telling us we're not going to get any live teaching for kids in the elementary during their hybrid, during their days at home?
No, ma'am. No. A hybrid student on their at-home day will receive, at a minimum, a meet in the morning, an AM meet, and a PM meet. And they'd also would connect to any of their special classes, such as art or music, and connect to those synchronously as well. They would, in addition to any other teacher meet that they established that they would like students to participate in.
And how is that going to look different for the special education kids?
Well, the second part of your question, we have about 660 students that have IEPs that are in district. And as Mr. Trombley said at the beginning, our issue is a square footage issue. There's nobody more that wants every single kid back in than any of us at the district level, as well as our teachers. We just don't have the square footage to do it safely. So if we took those 660 kids and brought them all back in, we wouldn't have the space to do the required 6-foot minimal distance in our classrooms. We have older buildings with less square footage in our classrooms. So that's the issue that we have there. With respect to the special ed kids, again, I think it's a discussion. If you're worried about your particular child, if your kid has special ed services, that gets added on top of what Mr. Trombley was talking about in terms of what the classroom looks like. So if they're an integrated co-teaching classroom, then if they have a special ed teacher, and that special ed teacher is providing supplemental and ancillary supports and services, that is dependent on what your child's IEP is, what the goals are that they're working on, the expectations. If you've heard the Septo meeting, was they're supposed to supply specially designed instruction. How they do that, that's the teacher's prerogative of how they're going to do it. But they're going to do it, and they're going to communicate with families when they're home what that means. Number two, they're going to make sure that those kids meet their annual goals. They're going to make sure they co-plan and co-collaborate with their classroom teachers and ensure that all testing accommodations and program modifications are supported. And again, if that case manager of your child is the one that will be talking about what that learning plan may look like in terms of the special education while your child's at home. So, again, I think we need to get our students in. We need to ensure that our special ed teachers have an opportunity to kind of develop a system that's never been developed before. Nobody's ever done this before. There's no research on it. There's no best practices on it. So we need to give our educators an opportunity to do the work. But the expectations are IEP mandates will be met, IEP services will be provided, and supports will be consistent with each child's IEP. And how that, again, individualized education program, how that is for each particular child is really going to be a discussion between you and your child's special education teacher.
And I'm going to assume at some point too that as a special education team, you're going to take note and listen to your educators if they're saying like, we need more support for these children. Again, being the neediest kids in the district.
As I said, I think it's an individual case. Just because you have an IEP doesn't necessarily mean you're the neediest kid in the district. It just means you have unique needs that need to be addressed in a certain way. So as I said earlier, we can't make blanket statements when it comes to IEPs. And that's why I think, it's really, really, really critical to have that conversation. Our teachers haven't even had an opportunity yet to implement special ed services within our hybrid model. We need to give our teachers the ability to be the professionals that they are, that I know that they can be, and that they have been in really difficult circumstances. And then if it's not working, that's when a committee on special education needs to get in. That's when you need to have individual conversations with your teachers, providers, and if necessary, a special ed administrator. We can't predispose us to say it's not going to work yet. We need to give our educators an opportunity to kind of actually implement their supports and services. And I think that that's really at a local level. This pandemic is going to take all of us working together, all of us problem solving, and all of us being able to be resilient, compassionate, and be able to shift and know that what we say today may not hold true in 2 weeks. And I think that's an honest assessment of a very fluid and very changing situation that we need to be able to quickly adapt to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'm being asked again by our host of the Zoom to please, we have reached capacity of the Zoom meeting. If you have answered your question and you still want to participate in viewing the meeting, it is being streamed on YouTube and our Access channel. So if you are able to participate in that manner, we would ask that you do so we can have everybody who has a question can come in and ask it. And thank you for your consideration of that. Next in our question queue is Cami, username Cami. Please feel free to unmute and we look forward to your question.
Hello, my question is, I sign up my kids for remote learning with the intent that I know there would be live teaching. So now that I'm aware that it's just going to be instructions and then they're on their own, can I switch my kids to the hybrid model?
So what we'd ask you to do is to have a conversation with the building principal, because our cohorts were structured in a manner that allowed, as Dr. Stoll said, for the safety within accordance of our reopening and mitigation plan to allow our social distancing. So that was put into place to make sure that we had that parameter in effect. So I know you mentioned that they're going to be on their own. We communicated with our teachers union. We communicated with our administrators association. None of us want our children to feel that they're alone. So we have put in place what we think is our best approach to making sure that even if you were remote only, we put in extra instructional supports. We've put in the opportunity for you to receive support before anything is submitted. We've put in opportunities for there to be live synchronous instruction. And I'd ask you to consider seeing how it would work before making a decision along those lines. But if you do make that decision, please do reach out and have a conversation about your specific child's approach with your building principal.
The question is then, what happens if it reaches capacity?
Ma'am, could you clarify when you say reach capacity?
There's no more spaces for hybrid?
No. So Mike, you want me to take this?
It's your prerogative, Mr. DiCarlo.
Yeah, so that has been figured in already in the elementary school, so that would not be an issue.
What about the middle school?
And as was stated by Mr. Tremblay, I would definitely have that conversation with your middle school, with Mr. Kazacria. I would give him a call tomorrow and have that conversation with him.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for your question.
Thank you, Cammie. Thank you, Mr. DiCarlo. Next with a question is Marie's iPad. Marie's iPad, please feel free to unmute and raise your hand and state your question.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, Marie, how are you?
Okay, thank you for taking my question. So my son is on the fully remote program at the elementary level, and I just want to get some understanding based on what you mentioned earlier. Basically, twice a day, the morning and after lunch, it appears that he will be seeing his teacher for attendance only. And then with a substitute for the ELA and the math?
Sure, great question, Marie. And this is key to clarify, so I appreciate you asking that question. It's not for attendance only. If you're looking at the schedule that we posted, again, that's just for a generic overview of what a day might look like. It's not a script of what will occur at the grade level, particularly in the elementary level. So we put attendance in there just to show that we are taking attendance twice at the elementary level. That morning meeting and afternoon meeting have a couple components in it at a minimum. Teacher will take attendance to meet that requirement. They will also answer any questions that your child has based upon previous meets or previously assigned work. They'll also look for any opportunity to build connections between the entire class, such as whole group activities. And also they are expected to provide a detailed explanation of what students are expected to work on for either the AM session or the PM session. So that could include, we are going to have another meet at this time. Please make sure you're there. This is the assignment that's in Google Meet. Here are some specifics about the instructions or about the activity. Here's why we're doing the activity. Here's some resources to support you as you work through that activity. Those types of clarification and instructions to really help the student through that independent activity be able to navigate it as best they can. And then with respect, it's not going to be a substitute teacher conducting the additional, for remote only learners at the elementary, the additional 40 minutes of ELA instruction and additional 40 minutes of math instruction. It will be content area specialists. These are our instructional coaches who prior to the pandemic, and this is a case where we've had to think outside the box. We really relied on our instructional coaches to provide some great support to our teachers as we made the transition to remote learning in the spring. However, looking at what structures we have in place, we asked those instructional coaches who have knowledge of the curriculum, of how it's aligned throughout our buildings and also across the grade level, to really be that instruction, that additional support for our remote learners so that they receive instruction from a highly qualified instructor in those content areas, and who will coordinate with the classroom teacher, because again, that classroom teacher is still the teacher of record for your students.
Okay, so just one follow-up. So the coach, will it be the same coaches for math and ELA that they would meet with on a daily basis?
It would be the same person each day. Once the as the schedule says, once that instructional specialist is assigned, it would be that same person every day for your child.
Okay, and then is it up to their classroom teacher as to whether or not she invites them to participate in a live lesson? Is that up to her, or there will be none of that?
So the teachers have the flexibility within these minimum expectations to have students in the meet as long as they want.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marie. Appreciate the question. Next is Megan Capinelli. Megan, please feel free to unmute yourself and state your question. Good evening.
Hi, thank you guys for having this meeting. I just wanted to, ask a few questions. Actually, one question, but it's like multifaceted in my head. As a special educator currently doing remote and hybrid instruction, I'm trying to put all this together. My question is, on the days that the hybrid students are home, are they going to be learning the same material as what's being done in the classroom? Or is it like the teachers are going to be doing lesson 1 on the blue days with the blue kids in school, and then they're doing lesson 1 again on the gold days when the gold kids are in school? Because if it's not chosen to be a live stream of instruction, how is that teaching working?
So we've left that flexibility to our teachers. We've talked about different models. For instance, some teachers may choose to say, by the end of this unit, every student will be at this point, and I'm going to provide resources to ensure that that happens. We've also had teachers say, well, I want to provide lessons for in-person students so that when they go on hybrid, they'll have the opportunity to engage in those independent activities with a little bit more independence. And then when they come back in, I'll switch the lesson that I taught to the at-home learner. So we're giving the teacher the flexibility to see how they want to structure this modality, and supporting the teacher, of course, with some additional professional development days as we go down the road to see what, based upon what they've learned, what we can support them with better. So it's going to be a combination. And that's why we've asked the teacher to really be clear in their expectations when they set their expectations and communicate that in their Google Classroom with their schedule.
Okay, so it could I understand it's up to the teachers, and that's how it's been in my program as well. So that if the teacher should decide to just live stream and on the new instruction, then there's no issue. But if by chance that's not how it's going, and I totally understand, because it is really hard to manage the kids on screen and the kids in school, and make sure you're reaching everybody. So if they should choose that they're doing new material while the students are in person, then it's just like supportive material then for the students who are home, the supportive material that's posted on the classroom?
It could be that flipped approach to the classroom where I'm having students view new content, but I'm not going to hold them responsible for anything until they come in and we clarify and we use that new content for something. But yes, as you explained, it could be a number of different approaches as you shared.
Yeah, and Megan, I just want to say thank you for bringing your perspective as a teacher. I think we've had many meetings with our teachers that there are multiple ways to do this. Some teachers want to live stream their new instruction, and that's how they want to do it, and say, okay, kids at home, you do this. Kids in person, we're going to work on really diving deeper into that. Some teachers have flipped their classrooms and say, like, we're going to start all together. And you know what? Kids at home, I'm going to work with you specifically. Kids here, you're going to do an independent activity, and then we're going to switch. So there's been multiple ways to get at it. I think, again, it goes to, as a teacher, it goes to what's my lesson objective, what's my instructional approach, and what's the best way that I can ensure that the kids in front of me and the kids at home get what they need so that they can progress through the curriculum. So there's multiple ways to get at it. And as a teacher, I think you know that for us to dictate to a teacher that you will lecture to every kid for 40 minutes every period. My son is in a hybrid model. They're live streaming all the time in a different district. My son doesn't like coming to school. I'm just telling you his experience, and because it's so difficult to juggle between making sure that what's going on in your classroom in person translates over the screen, and at the same time, what you're doing over the screen translates to in-person instruction. Sometimes that works, but all the time it doesn't. And my son's a testament to that. So I can tell you, we've learned from other districts, as Mr. Trombley said, we've learned from our educators who are doing this work. And there are multiple ways to get at it. And it's nuanced, and I understand it's really difficult if you're not an educator. And we're trying to be as clear and prescriptive as we can, but not boxing our teachers in.
Okay, thank you. And I, you know, I, as an educator, I do appreciate that, like the flexibility and the direction at the same time. So thank you for explaining.
And that was really the work we did with our union partners and our administrators as well too, Megan. So thank you.
Thank you.
So just want to be mindful of the time. If we do not get to your questions, because I see there are a number of hands raised, if we do not get to your questions, please feel free to send them to us and we will follow up to you. We do want to be mindful of people's time, but also try to answer as many questions as we can. Next in the question queue is Katie Donovan. Katie, please feel free to state your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Katie. How are you?
Hello?
Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, Katie, we can hear you.
Hi, great. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
First, I just want to say thank you so much. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job working throughout this crazy time. My daughter is kindergarten. She's a kindergartner, and she's doing fully remote. She's also special ed. So I was just wondering, I'm seeing these 2 times meeting. She hasn't had that this whole time. Will that now start, or is that not required for her class?
So at this current time, we are in a modified version of our fully remote plan, where all of our teachers are teaching to the majority of our students in the remote model according to our reopening plan. The plan we're articulating the updates to would be our hybrid plan, where we have anticipated everybody back in on the 5th of October, where we have teachers with students in front of them and some students who will be at home and then coming into class in a few days, but then also knowing we have some fully remote learners. So again, that schedule is not a script. It's not aligned to a particular student or teacher. Our teachers will post their individual schedules and expectations for the students. But again, a fully remote student will receive a morning and afternoon meet with the teacher. They will also receive all their specials synchronously, and then the additional support of the 40 minutes of ELA and 40 minutes of math with our content area specialist.
And Katie, to this week where kindergartners are in, like today was a half day for blue cohort kindergartners. This week is a total different animal, if you will. Like we're like working on making sure we know how to take everybody's temperature and getting the kids into their classroom, and we only had a half day to do it. So if today looked different and tomorrow looks different, and then we do it all over again with the gold cohort, please understand we're doing the best that we can to get our new kiddos in, to get them comfortable with school, to wearing masks, to sitting 6 feet apart. So this week is really us trying to put our actual plan that was on paper from health and safety plan on paper and trying to like execute it. And so this week, the kind of learning plan is kind of what we are trying to roll out to everybody. But really this week is about getting kids comfortable running our buses so that when we start on the 5th, we work some of the kinks out of it, if you will, and our newest learners or our transition learners, our kindergarten through 2 and our 6th and our 9th grades, get a chance to acclimate to a brand new building that they've never been able to see before. So this week is going to look a lot different.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, she seems to be doing fantastic at home. I have no issues with her. I just wanted to know if I need to be like, because I guess it's kind of on our own time at the moment. So I just want to make sure that some days she finishes, before the day is over, and, she did everything. She did her gym, she did music, she did her paperwork, she did the computer work, she did everything. And so I just want to make sure that if there's going to be 2, check-ins, that I'm here for the check-ins.
There will be a schedule, Katie.
Yes. Okay.
And as we go on the 5th, the teachers will put out the schedule. So that meet time will be a specific time, those 2 meet times. That time with the instructional coach, if you will, those 2 40-minute blocks, that will be at a specific time. So there'll actually be a schedule. We're just not there yet because we're in a fully remote, quasi fully remote. And now we're in like some in between where we're just trying to get kids in.
Right. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate the feedback. Next, Kara DiNapoli, please feel free to state your question.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. The first question, I guess, is about building level supports. So in the beginning of the school year, I was given certain dates and times that the building level supports would be like rolled out. And now I got something else in the mail saying something different. So a student who requires building level math intervention or reading intervention. Is that happening, and how and when?
Sure. So interventions will still be happening. And my understanding is that interventions will happen fully remote. So those will be synchronous times as well too. Without being able to speak to the specific reason why those times changed, again, we're still trying to make sure that our plans and our schedules are appropriate and are effective. So there may have been some changes early on. We hope to stabilize those as we move towards the 5th. But again, those interventions will be happening, and I believe they will be happening for the most part remotely.
Okay. And then I just have two other quick things just to.
Sarah, would you mind if we have a line of people waiting? Would you mind if we move on to the next person?
And Kara, you could please email either Mike or myself or the building principal. We're happy to answer your questions.
No, Greg, thank you so much for saying that, but I have, and I haven't really been given responses. So, and my son is a student with special education services and related services, and all I keep hearing is blanket statements not addressing special education students.
So Kara, how about you give me a call tomorrow?
I understand that services are going to be delivered differently. As a special education teacher myself, I understand that, but that doesn't mean that they're not delivered at all.
Absolutely.
I will gladly follow up with you by phone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kara. Next, Melissa Davis. Melissa, please feel free to state your question.
Hi, I was just wondering, the content specialty teachers slash instructional coaches, what exactly are their certifications? So are they teaching assistants? Or what certifications do they have?
So they're great question. These are fully certified teachers who are in this particular case are elementary certified and have specialty in either of those content areas. And they've been providing prior to the pandemic, they've been providing direct instructional support to our classrooms, whether that be helping our teachers plan, helping implement programs, helping coordinate updates to our curriculum, but also co-teaching, co-planning with our teachers, and modeling for teachers exemplar lessons. So they've really been a key support. We just need to utilize them. As someone said before, we need to start thinking about what we have and how we might be able to use it differently. That was a key area to do that here. So they're content area specialists, meaning that they'll be able to support not only our teachers, but they'll really be able to have a good understanding of what our students need in this too as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. This will unfortunately have to be our last question, but as Dr. Stoll said, please feel free to email us. We will follow up with you. We have a lot of questions to this. Our last question for the evening will be username C. Creasy. C. Creasy, please feel free to let us know your question.
How you doing? The name is Carmine Christie. So one of my biggest questions is, why are these changes coming so late in the game? As Dr. Stoll just said, several districts are currently proving that the hybrid along with live streaming is working. So are we making these changes based on an administrative decision, or are we making these based upon teachers union pushback about live streaming?
Great question, Carmen. Thank you for asking that. It's not about an administrative top-down decision. It's not about a pushback. It's about a true collaboration, hearing from our teachers, some of our very best teachers, also hearing from our building administrators and what they're seeing, also hearing from teacher leadership as well, and looking at what other districts have done and what other districts have struggled with and had some success with. Now, knowing that not every district is the same, we have to look at within Mayapec what we have. And this is the best collaborative thinking about a hybrid instructional model that we have at the time, making sure that we have our remote learners feel connected, but also ensuring that our in-person learners have an engaged, safe, and an effective learning environment.
With that being said, though, you keep saying throughout this meeting that when they come in, referring to the students, what about the kids who are not coming in and who are full remote? Sure. When are they getting all of this support that they're going to need?
So we looked at as in the, what grade levels are your children in? Carmine? Carmine? So we really did, in a general statement, we really did look at opportunities to provide additional supports for our fully remote learners. At the elementary level, you'll see that as 40 minutes of ELA, 40 minutes of math, additional supplement instruction to our students who are fully remote. At the middle school, a dedicated additional support session through what's already established in our teachers extra help time, where the students who are fully remote will receive additional support. And then at the high school, looking at a step-like program where teachers will provide additional instructional support to students on a schedule after the school day ends. Carmine, were you able to?
I just want to respond because I think
they just got kicked off.
I just want to respond because I think the question was alluded to that, well, other districts, and I said that live streaming all the time works. Live streaming 6 hours a day does not work. It's not a good instructional approach. And we're not saying that, our teachers are saying that. And I think it's really important to say there needs to be a good balance between, for those students who are remote, and particularly those only remote, there needs to be a good balance between live synchronous instruction, which I think what we talked about is those 2 40-minute blocks of ELA and math for those students, as well as some independent activities. And for those kids that are hybrid, there needs to be a nice balance of having the teachers be able to focus, because the duality of what's happening on a screen and what's happening physically in 3 dimensions in front of you is a hard dynamic. And you can't just live stream what you're doing when you're working with a kid in school and have a camera on and think that that's good for anybody, both the kids at home or the kids that are remote. So I think there, again, it goes back to a point that I think we all have to understand is that nobody asked for this. We need to give our teachers some time to get better at this craft. They've never had an opportunity to even try it. We're asking them to do what I think is a really hard and difficult task, and they're ready to roll up their sleeves and do that work. We need to support them as administrators. We need to support them as a Mahopac Central School District school community. And yes, you do need to advocate for your kids. So if something's not going right, we want to hear that. Your teacher wants to hear that. Your building principal wants to hear that. Central office administration wants to hear it. So that if we can get better at this, we want to do that. And I hope if anything comes out from tonight is that we are continuous learners, we're continuous improvers, and this is what we want to do. And so we may not get it right the first time, but we will continue to try to make it better and better in each iteration. And so I think Mr. Christie's question is really good with respect to asking like, well, what has changed? Well, what has changed is us evolving in our best thinking about what's good instruction when we physically have kids in, which we haven't had yet.
Thank you, Greg. I know there are a number of individuals with their hands raised, and we do want to hear from you. We do want to also respect the time of this town hall. Please feel free to email. If it's a general education question, please feel free to email me. If it's a specific special education question, please feel free to email Dr. Stoll. I want to just review our next steps so you have an idea of where we're going from here before we end the meeting. So we want to make sure that the continued safety of our staff and students is at the forefront of every decision that we make. Continue to comply with mandates and guidance. We will continue to listen and adjust as needed, just as we did in this iteration of our plan. If you're looking for when those additional supports for those remote only learners will be communicated in the specifics behind that. We anticipate having those ready to go to our coming from our buildings for the October 5th start date. Please contact, remember if there's a question throughout this whole time, even we said this in the spring, there's a question about a specific concern, it's best to start with your classroom teacher and then ask your building principal if you need to additional clarification or additional information on your request. Again, if the model that we're talking about this evening is our hybrid model, we have been in what has been what we're referring to as our full virtual or fully remote. If we need to return for whatever reason, be it directive by the Department of Health, we will return to our full virtual where we have to shut down a building or the entire district. Those specific sections will return to the full virtual plan that you have been engaged in over the past couple of weeks. Again, I just want to thank you for your time this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. DiCarlo for a final thank you and for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. I just want to take this opportunity, as you can see, those of you who are still left on, the amount of work over the last number of weeks that have gone into this. As you know, the superintendent of schools, I really want to thank Mr. Trombley and Dr. Stowell for their undying time and dedication into working with this plan, specifically with Ms. Pontillo and Tom McMahon, but their work with our teacher leaders, our principals, and our teachers in general in formulating this plan, I think is a testament to who they are as educators. So Mike and Greg, I want to thank you very, very, very much. To the parents, and I've reiterated this over and over again, as we start to open up, it is really so vitally important, and you're seeing this happening in other districts. It happened this weekend in Bedford. There's a lot of partying going on outside of school and kids not wearing masks and not following social distancing and sharing drinks and the like, which is causing schools to have to close. We really want to make sure we're working hard, and I know you as parents are. We want to get our kids back in, but please make sure that we tell our kids, especially our older students, and I know it's not easy, to make sure they continue to follow these rules, because if we don't, and then all of a sudden we open up and then we have to be out because there's a number of kids who are COVID positive because they're not following those protocols, that can become problematic. We want to make sure that we can stay in school, hopefully for the remainder of the school year. And as things are progressing, I'm hoping that there may even be an opportunity to get everybody back as more and more science is being found out. And hopefully we can get back to what we are accustomed to, is having all our learners in. So once again, thank you for your spending some time with us tonight at the town hall meeting. As Mike and Dr. Stowell had said, as things evolve, we'll update you as we're going through. We look forward to welcoming everybody back next Monday on October 5th. And thank you again for your time, your patience, and your understanding as we work through times that we've never been through before. So thank you once again.